Hello, everyone, and welcome to Empower Global Coaching Ministries podcast. Be an encourager. This is your host, Clarabel Coriano, Transformational Life Coach. I am so happy you are joining us today. Hello, everyone. Today I have the pleasure to interview our 34th guest for 2024, Nichole Haugen. Nicole is a wife, mom to six daughters, a nurse, and a grief coach. And she spent over 10 years as a hospice nurse, helping families through hard times. Nicole knows a lot about grief, both from her job and her own life. And in 2019, her dad passed away after a long fight with cancer, and just 4 months later, her mom died suddenly in a winter storm. And on top of that, she discovered her husband had been hiding financial problems for 10 years. Through all this, Nicole found a path to healing, forgiveness, and learning to live with grief. Now, as a grief coach, she supports others on their grief journeys, helping them feel and understand and reminding them that they don't have to face this alone. So, today's topic is how to manage grief and loss during the holidays. So we welcome Nicole and to be an encourager podcast. And my first question to you, Nicole, is can you share a little bit about your background and if you can also share about your story of grief and loss?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So just like you said in the intro, all of these things happened. Both my parents passed away, and my marriage was on the rocks, falling apart. I felt very betrayed, resentful that he could hide these things from me. And so, really, what I found is that grief is something that doesn't necessarily come with death. We often think that grief is like, oh, you've lost a loved one, somebody has died. But what I've found through all this is grief is just any time that you have a major loss. And so it can be a marriage, it can be any kind of relationship, it can be uh, a job. Anytime we have an expectation that isn't met, we can feel grief around that. And also that the way that grief comes and goes was very surprising also. And so I just like to help people normalize grief and talk about it and understand that, you're not crazy, that this is
Mhm.
really hard and
Mhm.
it's not you, it's the grief. That's the problem.
Mhm. And interesting that you mentioned that there's different types of grief because we don't hardly associate it with the loss of a job or perhaps the loss of a relationship. Going through a divorce causes grief, the similar pain and the similar feelings. So, how were you able to handle your loss, and what has helped you during that process?
Yeah, so for me, it was realizing and understanding that for a long time, as a nurse and as a mom, and as many, many women do, I put everybody else first. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is when all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, I I don't like my life. I don't like how I feel. I don't like the person I've become. And then you don't even know where to start because you've given everybody else everything. For me, it was the point where like, and I think most women find this like, your husband's like, where do you want to go to eat? And it's like, I don't know, you choose. I don't want to have to decide. Like there's so much burnout around
Mhm.
like our decision fatigue and the things that we're handling that then when something does come up, like if you lose your job unexpectedly, all of these feelings and emotions come bombarding you and you can start to feel very angry, resentful because other people around you don't know that you're struggling so much.
Well, that's very interesting, the way you explain it. Thank you for explaining it that way. Especially like if you lose your job, excuse me, you lose your job and then you also have a loss of a loved one. It's like double the
Mhm,
pain and the grief. So the
mhm.
title for today is How to Manage Grief and Loss During the Holidays. Anyone who has lost a loved one can understand that there's a lot of pain involved in it. grieving the loss of the loved one. And during the holidays, it can be extremely difficult for someone who has recently lost a loved one, or perhaps they're still grieving of the loss of a loved one. I would say, for experience, the first year for me during the holidays, it was horrible. So I can relate to that. And to the person, grieving, the process leaves them very emotionally exhausted, like you said, drained and often confused, or even questioning to accept the reasons why they lost the loved one. So my question to you is, how can a person who is having this type of difficulties understand their own process of grieving? Because I learned that also that people have different process of grieving. Not everybody, right, grieves the same way. And how can they be able to accept that this is a normal part or a phase of sorrow in their lives?
Mhm. Yeah, and like you said, everybody does grieve a little differently. And so for me, like personally, my mom died at the beginning, like the first week or so in December, and then we had her funeral, and then we had Christmas. And so that first Christmas, I mean, it was like 2 weeks after she died. It was just, we were all numb. It was just getting through it. Young children, like we kept the traditions the same
Mhm.
just to keep it simple, because then we didn't have to decide what it would look like, where to host it, what to have for food. So we kept everything the same. And so I think for a lot of people, a lot of times it might be years later, things start to trigger, and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know why I'm having such a hard time all of a sudden. That was 7 years ago. It's like
Mhm.
because there's just ways that it slowly does still come up, and we try to kind of push it away. And so if you're in that numb stage, you don't want to think about it. I think just to acknowledge that and realize that and be like, that's fine. Like, that's
Mhm.
absolutely fine.
Mhm.
And then to also realize, like, I know for my siblings and I, like, we've always been in different places in our grief.
Mhm.
And every once in a while, we'll kind of hit up, and be at the same spot a little bit. But it does look so different that what that person, like what my sister might be feeling that day, might be different for me. And so that's also okay. She might be having a really, really hard day, and I might be like, no, actually, I'm really okay today. And
Mhm.
I don't I don't feel that heavy, heavy loss today. And so I think just as humans, we compare ourselves to other people.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
feels like if I'm doing what everybody else is doing, then it's safe and I belong, and so I'm going to do that. When grief can look so different, and to just understand that it's okay to be at different places, and what I go through with grief might look very different from my brother or my sister or even my husband, who, yes, we all knew that same person, we all had a relationship, but it looks so different for each of us.
Mhm. So, what strategies do you recommend for them to do?
Yeah, so I always tell people to first and foremost, like when you, especially around the holidays, right? If there's something that comes up, there's a lot of things
Mhm.
that trigger us in our grief. And so to name the feeling, to name it and to take control back over it. And a lot of times we will be like, well, what are you feeling? We'll be like, well, I'm upset because so and so did this.
Mhm.
No, that's not a feeling. A feeling is sadness, anger, resentment. Maybe I'm feeling in denial today. just
Mhm.
just naming it helps you feel a sense of control that you didn't moments before. And so naming it and then allowing the feeling. And by allowing it, I mean describing where it's at in your body, feeling, because emotions are vibrations in our body. And so
Mhm.
really describing, where is it at? What does that sensation feel like for you? What color is it? Um, Allowing that for 60 to 90 seconds, and then that feeling will fade away. And then it'll come up again, like it always does, right? We're
Mhm.
always shocked that these come back because I allowed it, I
Mhm.
processed it. It will come back, and to just do it again, however much you need for that day. And then I also tell people to plan. So what I mean by that is to to plan for, I would say, red, yellow, and green days. So green day that's a good day. On that
Mm-hmm.
day, those are the days that I can do projects and I might get extra laundry done and I might try cooking a new meal.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow days are days that are like, they're okay, but I still feel that hovering, looming
Mm-hmm.
sadness. And so what does that look like? It might look like I'm doing more of a basic meal, or when I get home, we're just gonna watch a movie and not take care of any of the chores. Or
Uh-huh.
red day might be just, I'm not gonna shower that day. I'm staying in bed, but I'm doing little things like maybe reading a book, or I know I'm going to scroll on social media all day and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. That those are great strategies, and from what I heard you say is to embrace that it is a process and there's going to be some good days, some bad days. Acknowledge the feelings and process them, and know when you have your certain days. So it's a really good self-awareness. So what can a person do before approaching a grieving person? And this is so, I think this is like so important, and how they can do their best to express sympathy or empathy to the grieving person, because not many people know how to approach. Some people just totally kind of distance themselves because it's almost like they don't want to approach it. So how can a person show that kind of support, being empathetic without being, out of place? Because there's kind of like a ethics, or what do you call it, an etiquette, right?
Yeah.
How you approach a grieving person so they don't get all, discombobulated emotionally.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that
So
makes
I,
sense.
I do think like grief is something that nobody wants, right? Nobody wants it. And so we all feel that awkwardness to begin
Hmm.
with because we don't want to say the wrong thing, or we don't want to upset them more. And then also with the person that is grieving,
Hmm.
so often like we don't know what we need ourselves. And
Hmm.
so when people show up for us, like we might be upset just no matter what. And so
Hmm.
knowing that that's okay, and that I feel super awkward, I'm going to go talk to this person. I know they just lost, their spouse or their parent,
Hmm.
but making it about them versus you,
Yes.
because um we feel awkward, we feel uncomfortable talking about death and grief, and so then we say like a cliche thing, which again is
Hmm.
fine. If that's what you panic in the moment, that's
Hmm.
fine. But making it more about them,
Hmm.
really asking them, like, do you want to talk about your loved one? Do you not want to talk about your loved one today? Just, can I send you a text, like
Hmm.
letting you know that I'm here? And it can just be simple as like a heart emoji to be like, that means I'm thinking of you today. You do not have to respond. It
Hmm.
can be just even helping cover like the basic things,
Hmm.
like, if they need their lawn mowed or snow removal, or hey, can I pick up your laundry and take care of your laundry for this week? Can I pick up your groceries for you? Like, or just doing, like, we all know that we need basic
Hmm.
things like toilet paper, paper plates, like paper products are very helpful around that time when you're grieving.
Hmm.
Laundry soap, like we all need basic things. So even supplying somebody with those basic things shows that like you are thinking of them, you care about them, and because we don't always know what that person needs, and that's okay. But just think of them as just like a regular human. What
Hmm.
do I need?
Hmm. Those are really great suggestions again. Because we don't think, that we're able to support a person in that manner. Like, let's say, like you said, doing the lawn, or maybe perhaps they need help with the house, cleaning the house, taking care of the kids, taking the kids to school, even a meal train, preparing the meals, because that person may be so debilitated emotionally, they're not able to cook or clean. So I think that answers the question that I was going to ask you. What do you recommend for family, friends and family, and husband and wives and children to do to help with being supportive, or perhaps what not to say or do? I know
Mhm.
that you answered kind of, but if you want to elaborate a little bit more, that'll be. Great.
Yeah, I think too, like to really try to narrow down for that person, like,
Hmm.
we talk about a lot about like love languages and different things. Like what way does that person feel supported? And most of the time if we're reaching out, it might just be a neighbor or something and just doing a meal, that's good. But if it is somebody that is a spouse or, your best friend, somebody that's really close to you,
Hmm.
you know that person. Um, you know a lot of times what they've liked in the past, like different things. So kind of look at those kinds of things. And I would say too, like things not to say or try not to say are like the very cliche things,
Hmm.
because, well, like, oh, they're in a better place, or they wouldn't want you to be sad.
Hmm.
That does not feel good in the moment. It feels very shaming. It feels very like, yes, I know that, like, I believe in heaven. Like, yes, I hope they're in a better place, but
Hmm.
right now, like, I am not in a better place. I am miserable. I feel bad. And when you tell me that, it all it communicates to me is that I should stuff my feelings aside and I should be happy. And I think that is the overall theme with those cliche things is that the person saying them wants to make you feel better and they don't know
Hmm.
how. And so also if you're that grieving person to just have compassion
Hmm.
for them, that's what they are trying to do. And so to just have compassion. Have compassion for yourself that you might be annoyed, you might be angry. Also
Hmm.
have compassion for them that they are trying the best they can.
That's a good how you say explanation of on that, because I heard that before too, that like that's not, it doesn't make the person feel good. It almost feels a little insensitive, but the person is not meaning to sound like that.
Yeah.
They want to be supportive, but they have gotten so used to, just saying that. I mean, it's like it's like a normal thing. Um, so, what would be one piece of advice that you will give to a spouse who has lost a child or a mother or father to help them manage their grieving?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just that it's it's never ending, but that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that there's never hope in it or that it never gets better. And I think when you're in like especially the acute grief, like the very beginning,
Mhm.
it just feels so crushing and devastating all the time. And it does get better.
Mhm.
And to find ways for yourself that you can help that process along. Like I said, just little
Mhm.
things for yourself because so often we look at the world and we expect our spouse to know what we need, or we expect our friends to know what
Mhm.
we need, or we expect a coworker to be like, well, they should know what I'm going through. They should have compassion for me. And people don't. People forget, life moves on. And so just recognizing that and asking yourself, what do I need? How can I take care of myself in this time?
Thank you for sharing that. Now, I want to ask you some questions around your hospice experience. You have worked as a hospice nurse for 10 years. And what has been the most difficult or the most challenging experience that you ever had experiencing this role?
Yeah, I think when you get really close to the families, a lot of them have been on service for multiple months or a year or so, and you get really close to that patient and their families. And so when they pass away, it is like losing a loved one for you also. And you don't really know what to do with that because you're told to be professional and you go home and they don't know that you just suffered this big loss. It's not as socially accepted. Like when I lost my parents, people reached out to me. They said things. When I lost patients, people had no idea
Mhm.
because it's HIPAA and privacy and all that. Like,
Yes.
and so you don't have to go into detail with anybody, but it is hard to suffer those losses, um, when you weren't like, you're expecting it, but you're not expecting it. You're not
Mhm.
expecting it to hit you so hard. So that's probably the hardest thing.
Yes, I can relate to that because I work with the prior homeless individuals in their housing. So I got to experience the same thing. Like, you don't have the support when you're grieving the loss of your clients. And like you say, you get those feelings like, okay, they might not be your own family, but you
Mhm.
still have a caring heart and you kind of, grieve them as well.
Mhm.
And you have to
Yeah.
deal with the families as well. So you have to be very strong with, in dealing with the family. Do you recall or have witnessed a consistent message from those individuals who were nearing death?
Mm. I think it always comes back to like very basic, like none of them were ever like, I wish I would have got the Ferrari. Like it's always just about family and time.
Mhm,
Time, time, time. Like I wish I had spent my time differently. I wish I had done this with my time. And so
mhm.
that was probably the most overall theme was like family, friendship, faith, time.
Thank you for sharing that. Did they talk about any regrets? And if so, what was the number one that always stood out within those individuals and why?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was like I I wish I hadn't given all my time to, a job or like
Mhm,
chasing that next dollar. Spending more time with family because that really was what was important, building those relationships. And so I do think that was probably the most or overall theme that I would see is just spending that time differently and not
mhm.
not on material things.
Mhm. That seems to be a consistent message with the deaf and dying in hospice. I read research that was done, and that was like the top number one. That they wish they spend more time with the family, um, and also on forgiveness was like I think the second one that they wanted to mend some relationships. I forgot the third one. I can't because I read that a while back. But yes, taking that time to be with family and realizing the most important thing is that the family and the time that you have, those moments.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, as a Christian mentor and role model, what will be one piece of encouragement that you would like to share with all the listeners who either recently lost someone or have experienced loss in the past, and you can also base it on whatever other losses that people experience, and what do you recommend for them to do during the holidays that can help them remember and honor those loved ones but also manage their grieving process?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing, especially this time of year that I like to tell people is that no is a complete sentence. That
Mm-hmm.
you don't need to explain why you don't want to go to a holiday party, or maybe that when I get together with these relatives, like
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's bad for me. Like I get upset, I get angry. And also knowing that it doesn't have to be permanent. Like we always think that the decisions we make have to be permanent and
Mm-hmm.
forever, so we have to make the right one. And so just knowing that there's a time and season for everything. And so in this season that you're in, it is okay to say no. It's okay to let go of maybe some of those traditions that you have always had just for this year or maybe for the next few years, and then find something that fills you up with joy or hope, or even that might be a stretch, even just to like, I just want to get through the day and pretend like the holidays don't exist. Fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever it is that kind of gets you through this time.
Those are great suggestion and words of encouragement, because that self care is most important, for the grieving process for them to continue to be able to heal and thrive. And sometimes you have to separate yourself from those type of situations, especially if the person may have died during the holidays. I think that's like you know a little bit more how you say difficult to process. So having that separation, like you said, saying no, maybe not this time, maybe next year or so on, but taking that time for self-care and to grieve and honor that individual, but also realizing, like you said, not to stay stuck, right? Not to stay stuck in that grieving process of isolating yourself from, the like the family and those type of celebration, because then the grief can you can become absorbed. And I don't know if I'm, right or not, but you can become absorbed by that grief, right? Are there any other suggestions and encouragement that you would like to share on the
Yeah,
grieving
I think
process?
I think just what you were saying, where it's like it's okay to say no to things, but to make sure that you're not isolating yourself and to like just shutting yourself and making sure like then you'll get stuck. And so asking yourself, what does that look like? Like yes, it's okay. Like I'm gonna take a day, I'm gonna distract myself, but it's gonna be a day, or I'm gonna take these 2 days, around this the time of year when this person died. Like I'm gonna take those few days.
Mhm.
I'm really gonna focus on myself and what I need to get through that and really find things that you enjoy, because it is very easy for us to just pick up a phone and start scrolling on social media, and all of a sudden like that does not that does not bring us joy. Most of the time when I talk to everybody, they're like, I always end up feeling worse and like comparing myself, and I just like time is wasted. And so what is it in those moments that yes, it's okay to say no to things, but also to find things that, when you're on your deathbed, that you're not gonna be like, oh my gosh, I wasted so much time. I
Mhm.
regret that.
I like what you just said, the last statement, to make sure that you're thinking that, along the line that, prepare your life also, take the time and use your time wisely and share those moments with families and friends, because you don't want to end up, regretting that I wish I could have done this, or I wish I would have handled this in a better way. So that's a great reminder for all of us that, time passes by very quickly. We all lose loved ones. Grieving is different for everyone. Everyone processes very differently. And they remind ourselves also, like when we approach a grieving person, that to be a little bit more compassionate and sensitive to how they're feeling. And so I think that that's kind of sums it up. I think um, so. I thank you so much for sharing your expertise and sharing your knowledge on this and grieving, the grieving process. I think it's so important for the holidays to share this message. I thank you so much, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.